is the word. I would like to share with you guys here a little bit of what I've done with Juni, that is also, as I've mentioned earlier, the JetBrains agent tool. This whole microservice that you're seeing here, it's a Java with Spring microservice. I've not written a single line of it, but of course I've revealed it completely. And that's much likely the kind of service I've been working for a very long time. But you can see here tons of tests. We are using here Flyway to validate the migrations of the table. Even the last operation here, I've used the way I was mentioning, Open API documentation, a complete Open API documentation, split, not the simple, split completely and written by AI. You mentioned about the documentation, Pedro. That's amazing, really helpful to get you move faster. Of course, how AI knows how to do that. Pedro mentioned in Cursor they call it rules. On Juni, they called it guidelines. So this file here, guidelines, is the guidelines on how do you instruct the agent how to code better. And these guidelines were provided by JetBrains itself on their own repository. And of course, this is a living document. You need to put more details. And from the original document here, I've added some details regarding migration, database migrations with Flyway, and the Open API specification guidelines. Where did I got that? I used here the AI chat from JetBrains that it has logged out. I don't know why, but that's what it happens when you when you do it live. So let's just show here. What's Johnny, come on here. Johnny back. And this whole service, let me just show you guys the last prompt I've run here some days ago. I was implementing a patch operation for the beer controller. Um, and here I can see the history of it. I've just sent in a template. Uh, if you write your prompts as templates, you can reuse them. Wrote this template here, instructing the AI to replace placeholders, and then details how do you create a batch operation. And then I just needed to change the controller name and the entity name. And then I just applied the prompt here, changing the controller that I wanted and the entity and what it should do. And here we have, since from changing it, the controller, and it's a patch operation, it should not have any constraints on the DTO, because you need to accept new values on the DTO that on the original post you will not. So important thing here, you need to know what is a batch operation. You need to know how to do that by hand. Otherwise, we will not know how to instruct AI about that. So your knowledge is not throwaway. It's very important. And now also on the bottom here, to use the guidelines that I've just showed you, and instructed him to update the API documentation and to validate all the tests, update all the unit tests, and also to test the OpenAPI documentation with linking to that use node here. And here we can see how Juni works. It creates a plan for from your prompt, and it goes through it all, checking it when it's complete, and give the message much more likely how Pedro showed us with this link right now. And it has its own terminal, but what I like the most is not only seeing what it's doing on each of these steps that it describes. You can see what this has done through these steps, and if it's something missing, he will go back on that file, and you can also see through it. But the most important thing is when the senior developer comes to play. It's your time to do the pull request review from AI into your code. Here the code here is already accepted, but when this creates a new files, it says here add to Git. In this case, this is from my history. You can just see what this has changed through the agentic iteration. So I can see here that on the beer mapper test, I've asked him on the prompt to create he's on the test. This is just adding a new test for the patch. I asked him to create a new mapper method to copy from a DTO that does not that accepts no values to update my entity, because my previous DTO does not accept no values, because it's a post operation. It should contain all the values, and here you can review before accepting. And if you have a review workflow in your company, like it happens on the Pedro's company, you have two times review. You have you reviewing your own codes, your own agentic codes. Of course, you need to fix something by hand, and I can show you something that didn't happen, didn't work out of the box from the agent while I was testing the code generated from AI. It was on the flyway script. It happened here when this was altering the beer order table. What happened here is that I didn't told the Juni that I was working with a H2 in memory database. So it's created a SQL that works with a Postgre, with a MySQL, but the H2 in memory database has a particularity that it does not it's not able to do that all in one single shot. So I needed to split these two sentences here, and much more. This was the only change that I needed to do on this whole service. And we can see here 133 tests running and passing and testing mapper and the controller, the entities, the repositories, and this was all AI generated, of course, very well instructed. And what I do wanted to point as well before finishing this showcase here, and I'm not selling the tool. We are talking about agentic coding here, and this was my last experience. Is that on the very beginning here, I did some prompts that were very precise to him. I told him create on this package to create this package, the name of the entity, to use Lombok, to create the properties that I wanted in the entity, the version of it. Oh, For that, I can do that by hand, because if I do need to write it out for the AI, I can do this by hand. Of course, you can, but after introductory thing, after having more context to the agentic coding, you can start to ask it more elaborated things. When you add something like a query parameter in the beer controller list operation here, it's not just a single entity that you're changing. You're changing controller, repositories, services, implementation, testing, validating it, and even the documentation that has been also generated. The good thing is you should know how to do this by hand. If you're a junior developer, this is great thing to be aware of this, but you need to know how to do that by yourself before. This type of service here, I can remember writing this structure of MVC for over 7 years or more for sure. Exactly the same on this structure, is using flyway with this kind of tests, even more elaborated tests. But we're more highlighting how powerful this is and how far this can take you. But you need to know what you're doing, because overall, that's your code. It's your responsibility when this is going into your company's repository. If you're doing that on a personal project or a test like this, that's amazing to learn, to see how powerful these things are. But when you're doing that on an enterprise environment, you are also responsible of this code. And also, if you're doing it personally for you, be responsible of your code. Test it, put it to run. Don't just rely on that the generated unit tests are passing. Run it, see if it's not failing, test it, see if this is persisting. Own your own code. This code is also on my GitHub. If you want to check this out, this latest version is already committed there. You can reach out to my GitHub through my blog, igorfragadev.com. You will find the GitHub button there. Or if you just go straight forward, it's at intercont. It's called the Juni MVC. The description will be very clear that it's a generated code, and that's vibe coding at its best, I would say, because you're giving enough contexts to the AI to empower you as an AI developer to get things done faster and in a good way. That was my experience since we've
Yeah.
talked, Pedro. And